G'day guys, and today we're going to be discussing the Covington Catholic High School incident, specifically the issue that has popped up recently concerning, accusations of racism and that sort of thing. We're not going to be talking about their school curriculum, of course. Now, the actual incident pertaining to this high school has been done to death, and I'm aware I'm getting into it rather slowly. I've been moving house at the moment, so I haven't been able to record, and it's been done to death. We have exposed, through the alt media, how the mainstream media effectively lied. These boys were not mocking anyone. They were merely confused, bemused, I would say, when some random person comes up to them and starts drumming in their face. So what I want to do is take a more meta look at the responses to the event in question. So first I'll give you an idea of how this story was presented to me, a non-American on the other side of the world. So how this story was presented to me was something like this. So an indigenous group of people were attending an Indigenous Peoples March when they were approached by a group of teenage MAGA hat wearers. These Trump supporters then began to jeer at and mock the indigenous people, and this is where you get that deathly grin of doom which you have surely seen portrayed many times. So there are two key elements in this presentation. One, the Trump supporters approached the indigenous people. Two, they were mocking them. The first element, that is, the Trump supporters approached the indigenous Americans, was never actually presented to me, and I just had to take that as granted. The second element was supposed to be self-evident. Of course, the fact of the matter is this is entirely untrue. It's purely lies and slander, and it does reveal a very interesting thing about the media. Given the slightest contrivance of white people possibly being derogative or insulting towards another race, they will jump on it like a pack of starving dogs. There's really no need to investigate further, no need to look for context, further evidence, further video, anything like that. No, the mainstream media already has a conclusion, they just have to find evidence for it. They have this overblown conclusion of white people bad, white privilege, white people did horrible things throughout history, and they need to find a way to permeate this idea in order to generate more money. When you're questioning why the media acts in certain ways, you've got to remind yourself the old guard media, TV and cable news is dying. Its audiences are dropping by the year. The average audience ages are getting older. Younger people like myself are not interested in reading the newspaper or reading news. We turn to YouTube or Facebook for those instant news hits and that sort of thing. So believe me, when an older style media company can whip up a hysterical frenzy, they will, because it's the only way that nowadays they're able to turn a profit. They have effectively turned themselves into tabloids. This tabloidization, however, comes at a price, and it is the expected one. Tabloids are full of shit. So how do you respond when your big hysterical story turns out to be nothing? Or worse, turns out to be the exact opposite of what happened? The right wing in America tends to scatter like a herd of frightened seagulls. They desperately bust toss anyone to show that they are not a racist or a bigot or anything like that. And this is what we're seeing with many posts from Milo Yiannopoulos and Paul Joseph Watson showing the Covington Catholic High School throwing the children under the bus, the church, the nearby church, throwing the kids under the bus, and such and so forth. The left wing tends to do the opposite. It tends to circle the wagons, and they defend each other, or at the very least have complete radio silence until the issue blows over. The response from the mainstream media has been hilarious to say the least, a total product of their bullshit tabloid writing style. When you try to go onto news articles talking about how just 24 hours ago these boys were the face of racism in America, you'll find these pages no longer exist. And if you crawl through Twitter, you'll see bullshit non-apologies like the one up on screen right now. There's no mention of, I'm sorry, or I apologize, it's just, apologize. There's absolutely no ownership of the actions they took, no personal responsibility, there's no sense of, I fucked up, it's just, oh, my trick didn't work, oh fuck, I didn't trick these people into giving me all this money, oh shit. This furious backpedaling is why they want places like Gab and Minds and people like Paul Joseph Watson and Milo Yiannopoulos to be deplatformed, to get off the internet, to stop interfering with their control or monopolization of the narrative of society. The strategy of tabloid sensationalism, whilst a band-aid over their gaping financial wound, is also the straw that breaks their back. Within 24 hours of them putting out a bullshit piece, hundreds of people will jump down their throat with contradictory evidence, as we've seen with this video being released of, in fact, the native indigenous person approaching the group of teenage MAGA hat wearers. Now, as a mainstream quote news source, you're pretty fucked because your business model is quite sluggish and has very poor trim. Your presenting style is very slow. It takes you a while to get all the studio set up, make sure everyone's hair and makeup looks perfect and that sort of thing. all this stuff, of course, costs a lot of money. You've got to have the big offices and the big studios and all the lights and all the camera, and you're employing hundreds of people just to film something that takes about 20 minutes. Whereas someone like me can just throw my phone down, hit recording, and have something out before they've even got started. Now, whilst they could claim that their image of glamour and professionalism is very important, I'd say it makes them look even worse when they're so prim and dressed up and they pull out shit like this, because they look really professional on the surface, but it's all just a dumb facade. If you're the mainstream media, you're ultimately faced with two choices. Do you cut out 90% of the wank of your business and essentially copy the style of the alt media, thus lowering your production costs dramatically, meaning that you're not so fucked if your broadcasts don't do so well? Or do you whip up mobs in an attempt to deplatform your fiscal competitors? Now, anyone with even half an eye on the media nowadays can see which path they've taken, and whilst they may have some success in the short run, I believe it will be their doom in the long run. When you call someone a Nazi 99 days in a row, on the 100th day it doesn't quite have as much impact as it did on the first day. And also you've painted this grand image of, all these people, they're so bad, they're so deplorable, they have so many problems, and when you actually hear any sort of counterpoint from the person you're talking shit about, it breaks the one-dimensional image that you have created. Even something which in a vacuum would be considered small and meaningless, possibly even mundane, could be earth-shattering in the meta-political war because of this platform of lies and slander and propaganda that you have propped things up on. And lastly, wrapping things back around to where we started, when you do the hyperventilating tabloid thing, you often get things wrong. And it's very easy to prove that you're wrong, and this of course gets egg on your face. So yes, thoroughly late to the party, but I can hardly stand by and watch this blatant violation of the truth. The Covington Catholic boys, of course, did no wrong, and in good news, things look like they're heading up towards a massive lawsuit. This event is a big loss for the mainstream media and demonstrates the big pendulum swing that is happening in regards to how people get their news. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.